The darkness is still thick when the first engine growls through the gate. One by one, olive drab transport trucks roll in, their canvas covers dusted gray from the long road. The engines tick as they cool. Guards bark short commands. Boots crack against gravel. From weeks of movement and waiting and not knowing, North Africa already feels like it belongs to someone else's life. The sand, the heat, the thunderous crack of British artillery closing in from 3 directions, that was where they took him. Months ago, when the Africa Corps finally collapsed, and the war he had believed in with his whole chest folded like a house of cards in a rainstorm, the radio in Berlin had been very clear about what happened to Germans in American captivity. Starvation, beatings, humiliation designed to break the will. He had repeated these things to himself during the crossing like a prayer. Not because he believed them entirely, but because believing them made the uncertainty easier to carry. Then the truck stops, the tailgate drops, and the first thing Karl Weiss smells is coffee. Not the thin, bitter substitute his mother had been brewing at home from roasted chicory root and whatever else could be scraped together. Real coffee? His stomach tightens before his mind can stop it. He swallows without meaning to. The camp spreads out before them as the guards call roll numbers, checking tags against clipboards with the quiet efficiency of men who have done this 100 times before. Karl looks. He cannot help looking. A sergeant checks Karl's tag, glances once at his face, and waves him forward with a flat, uninterested gesture. "That's it," he says. Karl steps through the gate. It does not come. Around him, the other Germans exchange looks. These are not frightened boys. They have been saturated for years with a single image of America. A nation rotting from the inside. Factories idle, workers starving. The whole structure held together only by the manipulation of a small, powerful elite, while ordinary Americans suffered in silence. He is not sure why this detail hits him harder than anything else, but it does. Glass windows. Inside, he can see bunks fitted with actual mattresses, not straw pallets, not bare boards. A potbelly stove sits in the center of the room, already lit, already warm. Someone lit it early, before they even arrived. He almost looks around for the trick. That morning, they are issued food. Karl sits at a long table and stares at the tray placed in front of him. Eggs, scrambled and still steaming. A thick slice of bread, meat, and a square of butter, pale yellow, solid, unmistakably real, sitting in the corner of the tray like a small, impossible miracle. Butter like this has not existed in Germany for years. His mother writes about standing in lines before dawn for things that were not there when the line finally moved. His sister has not tasted real butter since 1941, and here it sits in his hand, issued without ceremony, without conditions, as if it is simply what breakfast looks like. He takes one bite. Something inside him cracks. Not loudly, not with drama. Quietly, the way ice fractures in spring, a sound you almost miss until the whole surface shifts. Days pass. The rhythm of camp life establishes itself with the steady persistence of a tide. Morning roll call, work assignments, farm labor, construction repairs, loading and unloading. Always watched, always counted, but treated, and this is the word that keeps surfacing in Karl's mind, treated like men. Like men who had been captured doing a soldier's job and were now living out the war in accordance with rules that both sides had apparently agreed to honor. He had not expected honor. On his 3rd day, Karl is assigned to a farm detail beyond the perimeter. Another car, and another. A murmur spreads through the truck. Someone laughs once, sharp, disbelieving, the kind of laugh that is not really a laugh at all. They pass through the edge of a small town. A gas station with 2 pumps and a Coca-Cola sign painted red and bright as a flag. A grocery store with produce stacked high in the window and parked along the street in no particular order. Cars, dozens of them. No awareness. It's just a man going somewhere in his own car on his own time. Karl sits back against the truck bench. His heart is doing something strange. His chest feels like it is full of pressure that has nowhere to go. If this is real, if these workers, these ordinary laboring men in their dirt-stained clothes, about the war production. Guards call out. The moment passes, the way moments always do, overtaken by the immediate and the practical. But the image stays. The blue car, the chrome bumper, the man who didn't look up. That night, Back in the barracks, the conversations are low and careful. Men lie on their bunks or sit on the edges of them, replaying what they saw in voices that are trying to sound certain and failing. They show us only the good parts, someone insists. Another man says nothing, just stares at the ceiling. Carl lies with his hands folded on his chest and stares at the wooden beams above him. And the question he cannot quiet is not about cars at all. It is about the gap. The gap between what he was told and what he is seeing. Not trucks, cars. Carl hears them before he opens his eyes. A low rumble drifting over the wire as the sun finds the horizon. Tires on gravel, doors swinging shut, voices calling out to one another with the ease of people who know each other well. Sedans, pickup trucks, one with wooden panels along the sides, and a cracked windshield that no one has gotten around to fixing. Not men with rank or badges or the look of people who answer to someone important, workers. Men in rolled up sleeves and denim shirts and suspenders. One chews a toothpick without hurry. Another lights a cigarette, cups the flame against the morning breeze, and exhales slowly, looking around at nothing in particular. They wave at the guards the way you wave at a neighbor. Carl watches from the window, unable to move away. These men are here to supervise work details. Skilled labor, construction, machine repair, and every morning, without exception, they arrive this way, in their own cars, belonging to no one but themselves. At breakfast that morning, the conversation has shifted. The first shock has worn away, and what has replaced it is something more uncomfortable. Comparison. Franz. Back home, he says, my factory shut down twice last winter. No coal. The men around him are quiet. A house, not rents, owns the table goes still. Someone scoffs, but the scoff is hollow. Nobody pushes back with any conviction. Carl's detail that afternoon is assigned to a rail yard on the edge of town. Freight cars need unloading. Heavy crates of machinery parts stamped with dates barely weeks old. When a German makes a mistake, Bill corrects it without impatience, without raising his voice, the way a man corrects a mistake when the goal is simply to get the work done. At midday, they break. Bill opens his metal pail and pulls out a sandwich thick with meat, real meat, and bites into it with the satisfaction of a man who worked for it and earned it. He notices Carl watching. Carl freezes. The interpreter hesitates too. Bill shrugs as if the offer were the simplest thing in the world. Carl shakes his head. No thank you. Bill doesn't press. He just eats, washes it down with coffee from a thermos, and wipes his hands on a rag. Then he asks, casual and unhurried, whether Carl speaks any English. A little, Carl says. Bill nods. My grandfather came from Hamburg, he says. Carl does not know what to say to that. It is just two men sitting in the afternoon sun, separated by a war neither one of them started. They work until the light goes long and gold across the rail tracks. A whistle blows. Quitting time. The Germans stand waiting for further orders for the next command, for the machinery of authority to tell them what comes next. Bill checks his watch, says something brief to the interpreter, and then does the most ordinary thing Carl has ever watched anyone do. Walks to his car, a battered Ford with a dented door. Opens it, sits down, starts the engine, and leaves. No salute, permission requested. No party official to report to, no superior to account to. Bill belongs to himself. That night, a guard hands Carl a small booklet. Pay for the week. Actual American dollars crisp and strange in his palm. He stares at them for a long time. Money earned. For labor performed in captivity by a soldier of a nation currently at war with the nation paying him. His sister stands in line for bread that may not be there. And here he sits, fed, warm, housed, paid, in a country that was supposed to be crumbling. The propaganda voice in his head has been growing quieter for days. Tonight, holding these dollars, he can barely hear it at all. He lies back on his mattress. The wool blanket is heavier than he expected. Somewhere far off, a car engine fades into the distance. He closes his eyes and sees his childhood street in Munich. Bombed, dark, silent. Then the image shifts, unbidden. Lights in windows, cars along the curb. Share the floor with them. Watch them move through their days from close enough to see their faces. And that is when the last wall comes down.